One Nights, how are we? We doing all right? Good to see all of you. If you have a Bible, go ahead and open them with me to Mark chapter 8. Mark chapter 8. That's where we're going to camp out today. And just to kind of rehash just where we're at, we've been in a series called In or Out. In or Out. We've been doing this series really to challenge all of us, me included, our staff included, to come out of lukewarm faith. Right, Christians, we kind of go through these seasons, right, where we're all in for Jesus, we're in for Jesus, we're on fire for Jesus, typically like right after camp, right? You go to camp, you're worshiping, you're crying, everything's amazing, and you get back to real life, and the fire's there for a little while, you're all in for a little while, but then the passion starts to wane a little bit, doesn't it? I've been there. And so we've done this series really to act as a reminder for all of us that, like what Britt said week one, casual Christianity does not exist. Casual Christianity does not exist. And then last week we had Mr. Josh come, and he challenged us, hey, if you've been processing lukewarm faith, if you realize that maybe you've been kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out, maybe you've been that casual Christian, hey, if you want to fix it, you got to face it. If you want to fix it, you got to face it, right? If you're feeling casual, if you're feeling lukewarm, face it. Well, tonight, with those kind of ideas in mind in this series in mind, I just kind of want to make a general observation, okay? Make a general observation. I think for a lot of my life, I had this misconception, maybe because I grew up in America, maybe because I grew up in a good family, maybe because we grew up in Orlando, Florida, where we have theme parks and a big church like this and all the resources that we have. I think sometimes I had the misconception that following Jesus would be easy. But what I've come to learn is, maybe you are starting to learn this, or maybe you've learned it for a long time. I realize that following Jesus is actually harder than I thought it would be. Jesus brings us rest. Jesus brings ease to our life. Jesus is peace. But following Jesus, being a fully committed follower of Jesus, being fully devoted to Him, that's not always easy. In fact, it tends to be a lot harder than we think it's going to be. And I'm raising this because the text that we're going to look at tonight, Mark chapter 8, I am so excited to show you what I see here. Because I think when you really get it, like when you get what this passage is talking about, it can change your life for the better. And I'm so excited to share those things with you. But on the other end, I'm also not excited to share these things with you. Because when you really get it, when you really get what following Jesus entails and what He expects of us, it's going to require all of us, including myself, to be challenged and to change and at some level to embrace being uncomfortable. And I love y'all, right? And my impulse and my tendency, even as a dad now, is I want to make life as good as possible for you, safe and sound and cozy and talk about the grace of God, and that's all true. But what I see here in Mark 8 is that following Jesus is not always easy. And so we're going to start in verse 34. We're going to start in verse 34. But before we turn there, let me pray for us one more time. Then we'll jump in. Jesus, I'm so thankful for these students. They could be anywhere else. They could be anywhere else, God, but they chose tonight to come and study your word, to be in community, to have friends that are on the kind of the same trajectory of following you. And so, Father, I pray, God, that you would show us new things from your word tonight. Fresh truths, good challenge. Because, Jesus, you invite all of us to come as we are. To come as we are, God. You'll accept anyone who wants to follow you. But, Father, help us to see tonight that you not only challenge us to come as we are, Father, you also challenge us to not stay where we are. And so tonight, God, even myself, Father, call all of us out of a lukewarm faith. There's probably an area in our life that we haven't fully surrendered to you. And so tonight, God, let us draw a line in the sand. Let us be all in. We love you. Show us what you want us to see here from Mark chapter 8. In your name we pray. Amen. We're going to start in verse 34, but let me give you some context here, okay? So the book of Mark, the Gospel of Mark, it's written by a guy named John Mark, okay? And he wasn't a disciple of Jesus. He was a Christian. He was a kind of a good friend of the Apostle Peter. That's what tradition teaches. That Peter, the Apostle Peter, the guy that denied Jesus 3 times, but was one of his closest friends and the leader of the early church. He had a friend named John Mark, and John Mark, probably through the testimony of Peter, wrote this gospel that we have called Mark. Now, the Gospel of Mark, each gospel has a specific angle that it's trying to show you. So like Matthew is written really to Jewish people, and he's trying to show the Jews of his time, the Hebrews, how Jesus is the fulfillment of prophecies that were in the Old Testament. And John and Luke all have specific angles that they're trying to communicate to their audiences. Mark, what he's trying to demonstrate to us is that Jesus came as the suffering servant. And that's important context to understand, because the things that Jesus is going to ask of us here, the things that Jesus is going to expect of us here, is he's already done it. Is he did it himself. Like he's not doing something that he didn't do himself. But where we find ourselves in the story here is that Jesus has done some miracles. Obviously, he's born. He came down to earth. He was born. He started his ministry. He's done some miracles. But now he's starting to kind of telegraph to people, especially his closest friends, what's coming up. Right? He's kind of to start to like put on his blinker. I tell my team all the time, when change is coming, I say, hey, I'm putting on my blinker. Jesus is putting on his blinker here. He's letting us know and letting his audience know and his disciples know that things are about to start speeding up pretty rapidly. In the middle of all that, he actually has these conversations with Peter that frame what we're going to talk about in just a minute. He asks his disciples, hey, who do you say that I am? You remember what happens? Peter says, you are the Christ, right? The Son of the living God. And Jesus blesses Peter, and he says, hey, on this rock, what you've just declared, Peter, you're going to lead the way, and what you declared about me, you're going to be the leader here. I'm going to build a rock, this church, on what you've said. But then a few verses down from that, Jesus starts kind of sharing some things that make his disciples uncomfortable, because they were still operating under the assumption that Jesus was going to come and bring a political power and bring political change, right? And be this like mighty warrior guy who's going to come in and defeat Rome, deal with the religious Pharisees, and he's going to come and kind of have a power change. But Jesus senses this. And so he starts sharing this stuff with his disciples, and then Peter kind of corners him, right? And imagine doing this, right? Imagine Jesus is in the room, and you're like, hey, Jesus, hey, you got to like, don't say that, bro. Like, this isn't what we're doing here. Like, what are you talking about? And Jesus actually rebukes Peter. The same guy who just said, Jesus, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God, he rebukes Peter. And what does he say? He says, get behind me, Satan. Imagine hearing Jesus say that about you. How would you feel? That'd be tough to hear. But the moment we find ourselves in is Jesus is beginning to undermine the expectations of people. And we almost find Jesus in this moment of holy frustration with Peter, with his disciples, and with the crowds. And that brings us to verse 34. And as we look at these verses, what I want to show you are four expectations. Four expectations that Jesus has of someone who wants to follow him. Four expectations that Jesus has for people who want to follow him. Let's read just verse 34 to start. It says this, and calling the crowd to him with his disciples, he said to them, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself. The first expectation that Jesus has for someone who wants to follow him is that they would deny themselves. Deny themselves. Now that's a strong word, right? Like deny yourself. Like that's strong. Like that's not fun. That's not cozy. So what is Jesus talking about here? Well, Jesus isn't saying, hey, I want you to neglect what you need. Deny yourself the things that you consistently need, right? Sometimes he calls us to fast. Sometimes he calls us to give. And those serve a specific purpose for a defined period of time. You see, but Jesus isn't, when he says deny yourself, he's not calling you to give up what you need. What he's talking about is letting go of what you prefer. That's what it looks like to deny yourself. We all have preferences, right? We all have interests. We all have dreams, aspirations, preferences, hopes, ways that we want to live, ways that we want our life to go. That's normal. That's human. But part of following Jesus is realizing that ultimately our allegiance is not to our self-interest, it's to God's interests. And so if you want to be a committed follower of Jesus, what it looks like is to continually spend your life denying yourself. Putting God's interest for the world, putting God's interest for you one day, be real for a minute, putting God's interest for your family above your interests for your family and your life and your work and your career. Because you see, when Jesus comes into your life, there's not an area of your life where he doesn't say, mine. And so what it looks like to follow Jesus is to deny yourself, to care about God's interests more than your interests. Do not see yourself as just this individual that receives God's blessings and receives his grace and receives his love. No. You're playing one small role in a much bigger story. Let me give you this illustration, okay? I was watching football. I love football. I'm an athlete. I'm a jock, okay? So a lot of my illustrations are sports. So if you don't like sports, hang with me. But I was watching football this past weekend, and I noticed something in particular. I've seen it before, but I was thinking about this message, and I was thinking about y'all, and I was like, oh, okay, I think this is a good way to illustrate this. So I was watching football. I was watching Notre Dame play. Are there any Notre Dame fans in the room? You're a Notre Dame fan? Britt? Okay, cool. Well, I'm not a Notre Dame fan, but I am a fan of what they did with their jerseys, okay? And you may know this. Notre Dame has this tradition. Their football team was started by a guy named Lou Holtz. So I coached way back in the day. He actually lived or lives. I think he's still alive. Luke, is Lou Holtz still alive, or did he die? Ah, bummer. Okay. Well, R.I.P. Lou Holtz. I think he's a believer, so it's good. Anyway, so he started this tradition, okay, where, football teams generally, right, they have their jerseys, and then on the back of their jerseys, right, they have the player's last name on the jersey, okay? But Lou Holtz started this tradition because he started to see that his players, his guys, they were starting to play basically for individual recognition. In other words, they had their self-interest at heart, right? Like they really only cared about throwing the touchdown and catching the touchdown and making the good run or making the big tackle or making the saving play or kicking the winning field goal. They really were just trying to play for individual recognition. So he saw this. And he said, here's how I'm going to send a symbol and remind people what we're really trying to do here. He removed the last name from the jersey. Should be a picture here of some guys locked arms together. A lot of other teams have done this now because of this guy, Lou Holtz, implementing this. You see, the reason I'm telling you this illustration is because this is kind of what it looks like to deny yourself. You realize that if your life is a jersey, your name really isn't on the jersey. The kingdom of God is on your jersey. And let me challenge you for a minute. Some of you are wearing jerseys with the name of seeking approval. And you come to church and you go to school and you go home and all you think about is getting that girl to like you. Like that's where your mind's at. That's where your heart's at. Some of you come here and the only thing you can think about is your grades. Some of you, the only thing you can think about here is making sure that you get in that friend group. Like you walk into the cafeteria and you're automatically starting to think about being accepted and feeling belonging and being affirmed. And your mind is so wrapped up in the things of this world because you're so self-interested. But let me challenge you, man. When your perspective gets bigger than the small things that often have a grip on our heart, it's going to change your life. When you start denying yourself and stop living for your name and start living for the name above all names, it's going to change your life. It's going to change your life. And so what Jesus expects of his followers is for them to deny themselves, to not care so much about yourself. And if you're finding right now that as I'm speaking and you're like, oh man, yup, that's okay. I've been there. I'm not calling you to be perfect, but I am calling you tonight to make a change. Because there are idols in our heart that are rooted in our own self-interest. And we play and we live for Jesus' name, not ours. But part of denying yourself, there's this essential ingredient here that's really tough to talk about, but it's real. It's for real. And it's found in verse 34 too. There's another expectation here that's connected to denying yourself. Go back to verse 34 with me. It says this, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself. And what does it say? Take up his cross and follow me. We quote this verse. We love this verse because it's like high challenge. But when you really think about it, man, this was the instrument. The cross was the instrument of torture for thousands of years. People feared this thing above all else. People spent their whole lives trying to avoid this. And so Jesus is saying, hey, that thing that none of you want to do, take it up. And not just take it up reluctantly, right? Not just bring that thing on your life. Have you ever gotten a present from your grandmother? right? And you're just like, thanks, Grandma, appreciate it. Like, right? That's not what Jesus is talking about here when he says take up his cross. When he says take up your cross, what he's saying is want, desire to take up your cross. How could he say this? Like, how could Jesus call us to this? To deny yourself and take up your cross. Like, why would anyone want to do that? We'll see about that in just a minute, but like, the Bible teaches to rejoice in your suffering. Rejoice in your suffering. And so if you want to follow Jesus, if you want to be a committed follower of Jesus, we have to deny ourselves and we have to embrace suffering. That's heavy, man. Like, we need to think about it. Not just reluctantly participate. Not just agree with it. Not just say, yeah. No. Embrace it. Like when Jesus says, take up your cross. Let me put it to you this way. Have y'all ever played that game where like maybe a teacher's done it for an icebreaker, or maybe you've played it like on a road trip with your family, right? You play that game where you're like, hey, if you could bring any item to an island, like what would you bring? You know what I'm talking about, that game? And you have to like go through the list, and what you're doing there is you're forced to prioritize what you would want to bring. Like if you get one item, what's that thing that you want to bring with you? Right? And there's always a lot of answers, right? I'm sure it'd be like iPhone, like my Bible, like food, or like a survival guide, like how to survive a deserted island, right? Like whatever your thing would be. This phrase, take up your cross, what Jesus is saying here is like, if you were to go on a deserted island by yourself, the thing that I want to make sure you take with you is suffering. Why? Like, why would Jesus want that for us? Why does he call us to that? Why does he expect us to deny ourselves and embrace suffering? Well, I think the answer is actually found in verse 35. And when you really think about this, it's counterintuitive and it doesn't quite make sense, but I want to show you here because there's a big truth here. Like, there's a big truth that really separates the committed followers of Jesus from the not committed followers of Jesus. It's in verse 35. Read along with me. It says this, for whoever would save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? Let's talk about this for a minute. Because it's kind of reversed, like it's counterintuitive. Like let's focus on this first phrase with me. Jesus says, for whoever would save his life will lose his life. Focus on these words, save and lose. How does saving your life mean you're going to lose your life? Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, if I save money in my bank account, I'm not going to lose money because I saved money. So what in the world is Jesus talking about here? Well, let's break down these words. This word save, what it means is to keep safe and sound. Like, to give you a metaphor here, it's almost like insulating your life with bubble wrap. Like insulating your life with a bunch of pillows. Like you live your life in such a way that you try to avoid suffering, avoid harm, avoid damage, avoid bad things, avoid difficult things, avoid risking something for Jesus. That's what save means. And so what Jesus is challenging us out of here is he's observing that when people start trying to build their life here on earth, they end up losing their life here on earth. This word lose, it doesn't just mean losing your car keys. It doesn't just mean like losing your phone. It doesn't mean like losing your homework, right? No. This word lose in the Greek, it means to destroy. It's a strong word. And so let me kind of give you the David translation here. What Jesus is saying is, hey, whoever would try to build a life on earth will destroy their life on earth. But notice what Jesus says here. But whoever loses his life, who doesn't have any regard for the things of this world, who's not trying to build a kingdom on earth, who's not trying to create a life that's just full of health and wealth and prosperity and the perfect family and all the things that this world tells you are the most important things. Jesus says that whoever loses his life, who doesn't care about any of that, for his sake and the gospel's, you'll be safe and sound. You'll save it. So the thing I want you to see here one night is, yes, what Jesus expects of his followers is to deny yourself, to embrace suffering. But perhaps most importantly, what Jesus expects of his followers is to treasure Jesus. A lot of you have made a decision. A lot of you have come forward and you've raised your hand. A lot of you attend and you participate. A lot of you do a lot of the right things. But let me challenge you. There's a difference between a decision and affection. There's a difference between a one-time thing that you did a couple years ago and valuing Jesus above all else. And so Jesus sets the standard here. He says, yes, there's a moment when all of us, we confess with our mouth that Jesus is Lord. There's a moment where we're all baptized, right? Where we declare to God and to people that we're rolling with Jesus, we want to be in community, and we want to be a disciple. But so many of us, and I was guilty of this. So many of us, we say, this is what it looks like to follow Jesus. No. For Jesus, what this looks like is to treasure him above all else, to value him above all else. Like nothing else in your life matters when you have Jesus. Jesus is the only thing that's going to satisfy your soul. Jesus is the only thing that can save you, the only person that can save you, but he's also that's the only person that can satisfy you. Nothing else. Nothing else in this life. All of us have idols. It might be a thing, it might be a person, it might be a wound in your heart, right? It might be a relationship. It might be a sport. For me, it was baseball, and I know that's like cliche, and I know I'm like the youth pastor talking about sports. I get it, man, but like that was the thing that like had a grip on my heart. That's the thing. I checked the mailbox every single day to see if I got any letters from recruiters. I eventually went to college, but then I realized I got that thing that I dreamed for, and I was lonely and unsatisfied and depressed, and I was losing my life. And I began giving it to other things that should not have had my affection, that shouldn't have had my heart, that shouldn't have had a grip on my life. And all of you right now, because we're human and we're sinners and we're broken, there are things that have a grip on your heart that you are treasuring, that you are valuing, because those are the things that make you anxious. Those are the things that keep you worried. Those are the things that keep you up at night. What if there was a way for you to treasure Jesus so much and to have such a big view of God and such a high view of Jesus and to value him above everything else, that the things that normally bug you and the things that normally keep you up at night and the idols that have a grip on your heart don't anymore? That's available to you tonight. When you say to Jesus, you are my one thing. When you say to Jesus, all my life for your glory, all my life for your glory, all my days, that's available to you. But Jesus expects his followers to deny themselves, embrace suffering. And when we're doing that, when we're denying ourselves and embracing suffering, here's what tends to happen. Jesus knows this. He knows the human heart. We start treasuring Jesus. And that's what he wants most for you, because he knows this. Jesus isn't an egomaniac. Like, he's not sitting up there being like, he's not this divine narcissist. No. Jesus loves us so much that he knows that he's the only thing, the only person that can satisfy our soul. And so what he'll do is he'll create these conditions and he'll allow things in our life to bring us back to treasuring him above everything else. So do you? In order to be a fully committed follower of Jesus, in order to not just be in or out, but fully in, what this looks like is to deny yourself, embrace suffering, and treasure Jesus. But there's one more thing in verse 38 that I want to call you to here. And here's what happens. When we start treasuring Jesus, there's this thing that begins to pop out in us. And it wasn't there before, but then just kind of like starts to emerge because you love Jesus so much that you can't just help but do what this is about to say. Verse 38, here's what it says. For whoever is ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him will the Son of Man also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. The thing that I want you to see here is that Jesus expects his followers to deny themselves, embrace suffering, treasure him, but he expects them to live boldly. To live boldly. Now, Jesus, what he does is he uses what he doesn't want us to do to teach us what he wants us to do. Jesus will do that sometimes. He'll give a negative example to point us to what the positive example is, right? And so what he's saying, he uses strong words here, right? He says, hey, if you're ashamed of me, if you're not living boldly for me, if you're not consistently in your life representing me to a hurting world, if you're not standing for Jesus, one day I'm going to do the same to you. Now, let me be clear here, because when I was in high school, I would read this verse at youth group. My youth pastor would teach on this youth group, and I would be in the back row, and I would feel a ton of guilt and a ton of shame because that day probably I would be in the locker room, right? And I'd have a chance to share the gospel with a friend, and I saw the opportunity. Y'all know what I'm talking about. You see that opportunity to invite that friend to church and share the gospel and share the hope of Jesus, right? But then for whatever reason, you just don't, right? And so I would come to this passage and I would say, man, well, if I was ashamed of Jesus, what is he going to be ashamed of me one day in eternity because I didn't do that one time? What's the standard here? What's the rule here? What this word ashamed means, it means a lifelong rejection. It doesn't mean a momentary hesitation. It means a lifelong rejection, not a momentary hesitation. And so I say all this to encourage you that you're in high school and you're navigating a complex world, right? Where there's stuff on social media. Even this past week, it was such a crazy week, right? But y'all were on social media. You saw all the opinions, all the divisiveness, all the hate, all the anger. And in that, right, we talked about this on Sunday. Christians are meant to be people of hope and healing in the middle of all that. You know what that takes? Boldness. But we don't always have it because we're not perfect. And so I say all this to encourage you, yes, Jesus expects his followers to live boldly, but I want to caution you against reading this text and doubting your salvation. Because that's not what Jesus is communicating here. What he's talking about is a lifelong rejection. And the Bible teaches that if you spend your life rejecting Jesus and his will for your life, one day, because he's a just God and he's a fair God and he's a God of holiness, he's going to reject you. And that's fair, and that's Bible. But Jesus isn't talking about a momentary hesitation here. However, I say that to encourage you, but this verse also should challenge you. Because you see, what Jesus is calling us to here is to live boldly where we live, where we work, where we play, the family we live in, the school we go to. Let me just challenge you here. Where you go to school, where you live, the neighborhood you live in, the sports you play, what God has made you good at, what God has made you not good at, your personality, the friend group you find yourself in. All of that is on purpose. None of it is by accident. And Jesus, what he wants his followers to do is to live boldly wherever they find themselves. Let me be clear with you, man. Jesus has, I feel like for the generation that y'all are in, there's been a line that's been drawn in the sand, and you're either in or you're out. And Jesus is waiting on us, y'all, me, Britt, Juan, whoever, to decide that we're all in for Jesus, and we're going to go take Boone High School. We're going to go take Oak Ridge. We're going to go take the First Academy. We're going to go take the classical school. We're going to go take Lake Nona. We're going to go take Oak Ridge. And we're going to go reach people for Jesus, and we're going to go live boldly because we're sent there on purpose, for a purpose. And that's to show people that when you start treasuring Jesus above all else, and then when you start showing people that he's done for you what you cannot do for yourself, and we offer them the hope that's going to change their life more than anything else, that's going to change the city. That's going to change Orange County Public Schools or Osceola County or Seminole County or Volusia County, wherever you find yourself. And so Jesus is working, and Jesus is moving. What he expects is that we're followers of Jesus who are bold enough to join him in that work. Students, I hope you've seen tonight that following Jesus is sometimes a lot harder than we think it's going to be when we first commit to it. I hope you've seen that. Denying yourself, embracing suffering, treasuring Jesus is nice, right? That's nice. We love that. Living boldly, we love that in the ideal, but when we get into it, it gets a little weird sometimes, and it gets awkward, and we hesitate, and I've been there. I'm still there sometimes. So I hope you see that following Jesus is a lot harder than we think it's going to be. But if I could give you one big idea to sum up everything we talked about tonight and give you a good challenge before we head out the room and go back to Wednesday night and Thursday and Friday and the rest of our week, I want you to see this. I want you to see that following Jesus will never be easy. But I want you to see here that following Jesus will always be worth it. Following Jesus will always be worth it. Let me tell you a quick story to close. A couple years ago, it was 2019. I was graduating college, and I was about to start serving on the missions team here. And so a group of college students that were in our college ministry, we got together, and we said, hey, we're going to go on a mission trip over spring break. And we picked on a place, and I can't tell you the country because it's not an entirely safe country. Went somewhere in East Asia, and we decided we were going to go there. And it's one of those countries where you can't really be a Christian, okay? Like, you can't really talk about faith. Like, it's not allowed. It's legally not allowed. And so we had to go undercover, right? We had to go there as students looking to learn about culture. That was our cover, okay? It's like we weren't necessarily lying, all right? Like, we were interested in the culture, but we had to have a short, truthful statement, all right? And so we hop on the plane. It's a 13-hour plane ride, and we hop off the plane, and we're achy, right? And we're jet-lagged. And we end up hooking up with these missionaries, right? We connect with them, and they're there, and they're doing their thing, and we just kind of learn that they're, like, exhausted, and they're tired. Like, they've been there faithfully, like, trying to bring Jesus to a place where there are no Christians. Furthermore, no one knows who Jesus is, and they're on the ground, and they're doing their thing, and they're crushing it, but they're tired, and we're there to encourage them at some level. And so we spend a few days on the ground. We're visiting college campuses, and we're going to coffee shops, and we're going to these like marketplaces, trying to meet people and engage people, and trying to kind of like build these connections and then hand them off to the missionaries because they need support. And there was one particular day where we stopped doing that, and we went to this village. And there was this missionary there who wasn't really in the city. He was out in the village in kind of like the mountains. And we hop on a bullet train, and it goes super fast, and it was dope. And we get on the train, and we get there, and we hop off the train, and there's this missionary, and we meet him, and he's a super cool guy, but he has 2 taxi drivers there. He knew these guys, and he had built relationships with them, and we meet them and meet the missionary. I find myself in the taxi with the missionary, this taxi driver, and then one of my other buddies, and the missionary speaks a language, right, that this other guy, this taxi driver, spoke. Right, so he's talking, but then occasionally, right, he would turn to me, and he would start dialogue with me. He's like, so what are you doing? What are you up to? I'm like, go to UCF. I'm majoring in business. I'm about to get married, blah, blah, blah. Tell him about my life. And he starts telling me some things about his life. He said a few years ago, he was living in Raleigh, North Carolina, had his dream job, had a wife, had kids, was a part of a church, a lot like First Orlando, like had it made, like had everything he could have ever wanted, like had everything. But then he said that him and his wife both felt that the Lord was calling them to move across the ocean when they knew no one, plug themselves into this village that was barely even on a map, and try to reach people for Jesus. And I'm sitting there in the back of the car, in the back of this taxi going, dang, man, like, would I do that? Like, when you meet people like that, right, you're like, dang, like, would I really do that? Like, you don't really know until you get in that moment. But like, would I do that? And so I'm pondering this, and I'm thinking about this, and eventually we pull up to this village. We pull up to the village, and then I see this like structure, and it almost looked like a lighthouse, okay? But it had smoke kind of coming off. It was like a chimney. It had smoke coming off the top of it. And we pull up and get out of the taxi, and then with good intention, like they weren't trying to do anything. The taxi drivers, they summon us. They don't speak our language. They summon us to say, like, come here, and we head into this structure, okay? And we're like, okay, like we don't know what this is. And so we walk in, and then we realize, yo, this is like a temple. Like there's like idols in here. Like there's like false gods in here. Like this is wild. This is crazy. Like I'm from Lake Nona. We don't got temples with stuff like with idols all around in Lake Nona. Like this is different. So we get in there, and then these taxi drivers with good intentions, right? They light incense, right? And then they like hand it to us. And we're like, oh boy, like we don't, like false gods, like we don't want to do that, you know what I'm saying? Like we weren't sure what to do, but the missionary, he sensed all this. And so he stepped in. And in front of all of these false gods, in front of these idols, in this temple that was in this remote village, right? He had moved his family. He had relocated everything, every part of his life, left everything that he wanted behind. He had denied himself, at some level, embraced suffering. And when I say that he boldly shared the gospel, like he went for it. Like better than I've seen anyone ever do it. And he's doing it in a language I don't understand. Like I have no idea, but I know what he's saying. And I remember vividly this moment where he's getting to the moment, like he's shared the gospel, like God created everything, but man sinned. But he gets to the moment where he starts describing what Jesus did on the cross, and he audibly like did this, and it was like everything shook. Like it was powerful. And I saw these taxi drivers getting, because he was speaking their language, they started getting what he was talking about. And I don't know if they got converted, I don't know if they got saved, but what I want you to see here is that this man, who I have not talked to this day, he's just this faithful guy who relocated his family, denied what his preferences were, left everything behind, embraced suffering. They're probably very lonely because they treasured Jesus. Because he realized that following Jesus is never going to be easy. But following Jesus will always be worth it. Now, I tell you that story not to make all of you wonder if you need to go be missionaries over in East Asia. Some of you might. Some of you might. The Lord's going to work on you. And you're going to sense that, like, if I do one thing, this is the thing I want to spend my life doing. But you see, for a lot of us, the bold step that we need to take is not getting on a plane, going 13 hours, and go share the gospel with some taxi drivers that don't speak English. The bold thing that we need to do is we need to walk across algebra class. And we need to go invite a friend. We need to go invite a friend to Color World. We need to go invite a friend to church. That friend that makes you uncomfortable. That friend that you not quite sure where they stand. That friend that you're around and you just hesitate to. Boldness might look like that for you. Boldness might look like at your next family gathering, that family member that comes in with the hot takes about stuff. They might need to not be argued with. They might just need to hear about the hope that you have in Jesus. What's your bold step? What does it look like for you this week to deny yourself, embrace suffering, take up your cross, follow Jesus, and treasure him along the way? What does that look like for you? This is what Jesus expects of you. He always invites you to come as you are. He's always inviting you to respond to the gospel of grace, that you can do nothing to earn your salvation. But at the same time, he's inviting you to not stay where you're at. And so, for some of you tonight, there's things that you have been preoccupied with in your heart that you need to get over. An approval from a girl, an approval from a guy, the thing that you want to do next in life. There are things that have your heart worried. There are distractions in your life, and it might be your phone, a little technology device that has your full attention, and that is your God. I don't know what that is for you, but I want to call you to something higher. And I want to call you something more. But on a deeper level, I just want to call you to something that's actually going to fulfill you, which I believe is Jesus, more than anything else. So we're going to sing a song called Center. And y'all know this song. But remember the lyrics. All my life for your glory. Like all my life for your glory. That's something that's so easy to sing, but my challenge to you is, will you go live it? Will you go live it?